Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Gavin Schoenwald of Southeastern 14 here with an hour of SEC football talk. Guys, the season is a couple of days away from us. Vanderbilt and Hawaii in week 0. By the way, we will spend a little time on that tomorrow. But first, guys, we've got all kinds of stuff to talk about. We've got quarterback battles. We'll be getting a little bit more into Kentucky, talking about the Wildcats today. But first, gentlemen, big news right off the bat. I don't know if you guys had a player getting suspended for taking money for something anywhere on your bingo card when you were going to sleep last night. I did not. But in case you live under a rock, Maason Smith at LSU, their best defensive lineman who missed most of last year, will be suspended for the Florida State game. Reactions to that, obviously a huge blow to LSU's defense. Blake, I'll let you go first. The shocking news of Maason Smith's suspension and your reaction to it.
Well, we should probably fill people in if they don't know exactly what happened. I think that's probably the first step because there's probably a lot of people that don't know the specifics on this. So like you said, he is going to be suspended for the Florida State game. And that it was the quote unquote, the improper benefits line used there. And so he'll be back for week 2. But I think Matt Moscona, who we've had on here several times, Chris, looking at the report for him, I guess it was Kayshon Boutte and Maason Smith participated in autograph signing in the summer of 2021 prior to NIL going live. Boutte served a 1-game suspension during 2022, missed the New Mexico game and the UAB game. And again, I'm just reading this word for word for what Brian Kelly said was the flu. Smith would have served his suspension last year also, but was injured. The NCAA made LSU aware that Smith would serve the suspension in the season opener earlier this summer. And so that's kind of how things have gotten to this point. So reaction, I mean, don't we all just think this is pretty ridiculous? I mean, let's just call it what it is. I don't know how else you could spin this thing. Let's just be honest here. We've all talked about kind of the landscape of college athletics over the past however many years, and especially now that things have, sort of ramped up with NIL and such. I don't really, Chris, have a lot more other to say than this. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just, I don't know how else to say it. Like that's about all I've got on this thing. I don't know. That's the best way I know to describe it. So.
Yeah, I think, you look overall from a 30,000-foot view, and there's just a lot of inconsistencies around this kind of stuff. And we thought that we were all happy about NIL because we thought that was going to eliminate these inconsistencies. And I understand that this happened before, the whole NIL stuff happened. But, let's just, if this happened yesterday, we wouldn't even be talking about this as a podcast right now, would we? It's just a guy signing autographs. That happens every day. And now this guy's missing arguably the biggest game of the year for LSU. Definitely, a huge game that can either, propel the Tigers forward. But they also lost it last year and ended up doing pretty well. So we'll see how that affects them. But overall, there's just a lot of inconsistencies here. And, I'm sure we all saw the, Johnny Manziel documentary recently on Netflix and him signing all those autographs and what that meant. And there's no talk about taking his Heisman Trophy away. And then you look more so about what Reggie Bush did in 2005 at USC, but they yanked his away. And so that's what I'm saying is there's that word, I believe you said it, Chris, whatever benefits, whatever that word is. What's the big word? I'm sorry, I can't remember. It's whatever benefits.
Improper benefits.
Yeah.
Improper. I guess it's not that big of a word. Okay, there's my vanity degree, Sean. Improper benefits. Okay, what does that mean? Explain it. Because there's just way too many inconsistencies, and guys are hurting for it. And not only are guys hurting for it now, but teams are hurting. And LSU is going to hurt. They're going to miss Maason Smith in that opener, no doubt. He's a force, an absolute force. I've seen him on tape when we were preparing for teams in the West last year, like Ole Miss, and throughout my career. Maason Smith is a force, and he's definitely going to be missed. And they're going to need him. They're going to need him in that big game for sure.
A few things that stand out to me here for what I have been told, and this may be public knowledge by this point. I think this was an autograph thing that his agent had set up, and I guess that was before the NIL laws went into place formally. So I guess he was a little bit out on a head start on that. Again, the inconsistency part, we could do a day of podcasts on that one, but we won't because people know that's no new news. I think two things that jumped out to me: the Booty suspension last year for the same thing. So he was suspended last year. I mean, you would think the NCAA could have said, all right, fine, serve your suspension during your injury. Let them both go at the same time. But no, let's drag it out into next season and punish the kid further after he missed the entire season, except the few plays after he got hurt against Florida State. That's number one. Number two, did you say this has been known since earlier in the summer? Why are we just finding out about this now, Blake?
I have no idea. That was the part of the report. Again, that's just, I'm reading that straight from website here. I'm reading it from sportsillustrated.com, and they had sort of sourced the quote from Matt Moscona, and that's what it said. So I don't know. I mean, like you said, we could spend an hour on this entirely about the NCAA and everything that's come along with the missteps here, but I think we wouldn't exactly be breaking any new ground. I mean, this is just something that's par for the course, I think, and especially in this era now. It's very silly in my opinion, but I mean, the NCAA has done things that are much more silly, I guess you could say, but that doesn't make them any less ridiculous. So,
Blake, anything else on Maason Smith? I know you're kind of monitoring the comments and questions there, so we can either continue to hit that or move on to the next thing, depending on what the comments are or aren't.
The hall monitor. Is that what the hall monitor?
You're the hall monitor, yes.
So, no, I just want to, as always, we appreciate you guys jumping in. We'll have some more people jump in here. Kyle, I know, left a question earlier, said he couldn't watch live, but we'll get to his comment a little bit later on the Missouri QB battle when we start talking about these quarterbacks. Shout out to Dark Matter, who was with us yesterday as well. We appreciate you jumping back in. Also, Sam talking about the Cats, which we will be talking about a little bit later on as well. And Austin back again, supporting his squad there. So we appreciate you guys jumping in. And again, if you want to leave a comment, we'll get to it at some point in the show. And a lot of fun stuff here on this edition, talking about quarterbacks, Kentucky, and a lot more SEC stuff. So.
Yeah, this is the second day we've done this show live. Of course, it's available on replay on our channel. So be sure to catch it there if you missed part of this. I guess next topic, most underrated quarterbacks in the SEC for this year was something we had on the list today. First of all, this is a really good quarterback year. It's hard to find. Well, I mean, look, you have some quarterback battles. We still have them going on. Missouri, technically at Texas A&M, certainly at Alabama, and I may be leaving somebody out. But, man, we've got some really good quarterbacks in this league. You've got some up-and-coming guys. You've got some transfers. We'll be talking about Devin Leary certainly later. Peyton Thorne at Auburn has won that job, so you've got an influx of talent in the league. Gavin, let's start with you. Underrated quarterbacks in this league. Give me the names that come to mind when we go there.
Man, well, first off, I think when you play in the Southeastern Conference, you can't just have kind of what we all have heard that term before, that game manager at quarterback. You need to have a playmaker at quarterback. And we've seen some teams in the past who claim, they have those game managers and they fall short of their overall goals. For me, I think I'm really intrigued. We spoke about this yesterday. I'm super intrigued to see what Joe Milton can do for the whole year. I'm doubling down on that from what I said yesterday. I think he, of anybody in this league, may have the most upside. At the same time, that experiment could be over early. It could, and I have no idea. It could go either way. Joe Milton could be in New York, or he could be sitting the bench by week 4, week 5. I have no clue, and we're going to find out, I guess. But I'm really intrigued as well about what's going on in Oxford. You get Jaxson Dart back, who was a solid player, and we played them. I believe it was either week 6 or week 7, and we were up by 10 at half, and then he turned into this absolute maniac in the second half and beat us by like 15 or 20. And so he could pop off like that. At the same time, they got a heck of a transfer in Spencer Sanders, who can basically has either all or right near the top of every record at Oklahoma State. He's a guy that had, I believe I was looking earlier, just poking around at that situation. We're talking about a guy that had over 12,000 yards of total offense and started 4 years at another Power 5 school at Oklahoma State. And so, that was to me the most intriguing transfer of the entire offseason, because he went to a place where obviously, I'm sure Kiffin was telling him whatever he was telling him and bringing him in. But you have a guy, you don't have a guy who leave a school like that where he's the bona fide guy and walk into a situation like that. Kiffin was not telling him, or whenever he was recruiting him, I'm not sure what he's telling him now, but Kiffin was not telling him that, hey, you're going to come be a backup. He would not have came to Mississippi. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like. I do think that Dart will start the year. I think it's his job. But I'm really, really interested to see what that looks like. Both guys can play. It's a great problem to have, and that's what Lane Kiffin does a great job of. Both guys can play. But if I had to really, answer the question of who's the most underrated guy in the SEC, it's probably Will Rogers at Mississippi State. That kid's played a lot of football. That kid throws 100 footballs a game. He probably has the utmost confidence throwing it wherever he is, and so it's probably Will Rogers. Mississippi State's not a Georgia. It's not an Alabama. So we don't see him on national TV as much or, get the praise or the hype as these other guys. But Will Rogers can play. Will Rogers can flat out play.
Blake, give us an underrated guy that we have not mentioned so far.
You threw me for a loop here, Chris. So we had most improved quarterbacks. You're throwing me for most underrated. So let me see if I can tie that in.
I can't read my own writing. That's
it's okay. Let me tie this in because I think it'll both tie together. So, I think most improved, maybe most underrated, whichever category you want to put him in. I think Connor Wegman's going to join that group for me this season, and I think it's because he's very talented. The talent's there. We talked about him last year, kind of how he finished the season, and we've talked about him this summer. And I think just all the tools that he has in place. He's a guy, I think, when you just look at the skill set, to me, looks like a guy that can play at the pro level in the future at some point. And so, but though now you take that, right? You take just the foundation that's there with him, and then you bring in Bobby Petrino, who we know has worked some magic with quarterbacks before. He's had, and that's the expectation. We talked about it yesterday. The Jimbo, Bobby Fisher, is he a chess player? Was I don't know, who am I thinking of? I don't know. But like the combination of Jimbo and Bobby Petrino, right? Chris, I mean, you got to fill me in. Like, who's Bobby Fisher? Is that we're going to put that as a title?
Chess player.
Maybe, I don't know.
Jimbo's playing chess now.
It makes sense, right?
Bobby Fisher.
These two guys are playing chess with each other. But I think, with Bobby Petrino there, and then you tie in the wide receiver group that we talked about, which I said, I mean, everybody's going to point at LSU, and I'd put Georgia in that mix too. Alabama's got a lot of production returning. Tennessee's group, we said, could be breakout. I'm going to forget somebody off the top of my head. But, I mean, A&M's group, I think, is as talented as anybody's. When you think about all those guys, and we talked about, getting Smith back in the mix, Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, like you just keep going down the list, man. They're loaded at that position. And I forgot to mention Kentucky's group, which we'll bring up in a little bit probably. But yeah, so I mean, I think all those things to me make Connor Wegman someone that I would not be surprised if we're looking up at the end of the season. And yeah, I mean, I think I would assume we're going to be talking about Jaden Daniels and KJ Jefferson and Will Rogers and those kind of guys at the top, maybe in terms of production. But who's to say that Connor Wegman couldn't be there just because I think of what's around him and what they brought in. And I'm really excited about what he can do now entering this next season. Cause he got a little bit of experience under his belt, now takes that into a new season where it's kind of a full reset for Texas A&M here. And especially that offense with those numbers. Yeah, I think he's going to explode and be one of the most improved quarterbacks in the league. So,
well, two things. One thing that caught my eye with Connor Wegman, we know he's got a lot of talent, but he threw 8 touchdowns and no picks as a true freshman.
Yeah,
that's something that stands out to me because you see a lot of talented freshmen in college football. That you can see the talent right away, but you can also see some issues with the decision making. That's the kind of number that pops as a young quarterback. That stands out to me. Now, I think in terms of most improved guys, I think the guy that's got to be that guy. And I think certainly on that beat and coming out of that city, it seems to be that people think this guy is. But I think the guy that needs to be the most improved quarterback in this league is Spencer Rattler. If South Carolina is going to get to where he's going, would you guys agree with that or push back on that?
I'd agree with it. I think that, South Carolina had that run at the end of the year there that, I mean, they were beating some really good teams, Tennessee, Clemson, and, handled Tennessee pretty well. And they were at an elite level, but they were at an elite level because Rattler was playing at an elite level. And I truly believe that, South Carolina, this is a little inside story here. So before I chose to go to Vandy, I was actually dead set on going to South Carolina. Now, this was when Will Muschamp was there, different environment, different coaching staff, didn't even have their new facility built up yet. Y'all, this was back in like 2017. And I remember I had told him, I plan on coming and all this stuff, but didn't really announce anything publicly. And then called him one afternoon in June and told him I was going to Vandy. And I know we've all heard and seen like the jokes and memes of the wrath of Will Muschamp, but I felt it that day through that phone. I can promise you that. And so every year when we play South Carolina, I think of that moment and whatnot. And Muschamp's a great coach and all. But I decided to stay at Vandy anyway. That's a little side story there. Jumping back to Rattler, if he can play at that level, I mean, they got the guys now. Beamer's recruiting at a high level. I believe they just got a huge 5-star recruit as well. And so, what he's doing on the recruiting trail, they have all the facilities. When Willie B, a night game at Willie B, is as great of an atmosphere. We talked about what are the great atmospheres in the SEC yesterday. That's probably right out there at number 2 behind the swamp in Florida that I've experienced as a player. It's electric. And if we have any people here watching who, travel to visit SEC stadiums and experience games just, for the fun of it, you need to go to a night game at Williams-Brice because it is jumping. It is jumping. And their fans are rabid. And they deserve a good product. And, hopefully they can build on what they did last year. But yeah, Spencer Rattler, we know what he can do. We know what the hype was coming out of high school. We knew what it was at Oklahoma and how that ended with, Caleb Williams and whatnot. But his ceiling, when he plays at that level, South Carolina's pretty damn good. They're pretty damn good, and that's what they need to be moving forward.
To bring that full circle, do you know whose son is committed to play quarterback at Vanderbilt next year?
I do know, and that's the young boy Whit Muschamp is coming in to sign at Vanderbilt. And it's funny because I've heard that when he was on his recruiting trips, Coach Muschamp, Will Muschamp, was with his son just like any other dad with a recruit, and I think that's pretty cool. I never had that interaction with him in the hallway. That may have gotten a little awkward, to be honest, but I'm sure that Whit's going to come in and do really well.
You watched Spencer Rattler play a year. You're on the same field. Now you were on the sideline because you were an offensive player.
Yeah.
But just what did you see in him last year that scared you? What did you say you saw that maybe led to the criticisms? Where do you think that gets better this year?
I think for him, it's always been a question of consistency. I think he's always had flashes. It's just consistency. And that's why they were so good in that Tennessee game, is because he was good the whole game. That's what they were able to beat Clemson, is because he was pretty good the whole game. And, for us, he had a little bit of an up and down game, but when he was on, I really noticed it when he was able to escape the pocket and make plays with his feet or scramble and throw on the run. I believe he had a touchdown. I can literally visualize it in my head, going towards our south end zone, back towards our facility, where he was running on the run and threw it and on the run, and the guy made a great catch, great play, and he's just got this swagger about him. He's always had that. He's had it since high school. I'm sure some people have seen that QB1 documentary or whatever. He's always had a little bit of an edge to himself, and now that his play is, he kind of got a bad rep, if we're being honest, about his personality or his competitiveness. But now he's getting to a point where he's developed enough where his play is backing it up. And that makes it for a really, really dangerous player who's playing well, who has that swagger, who has that edge. So I'm intrigued. I'm really intrigued to see what South Carolina does this year. You're going to have teams who are going to absolutely come for the jugular on them when they play in Knoxville. That game's going to be rowdy because they're going to want the revenge for last year. When they play Clemson again this next year, you're going to have some teams that are playing South Carolina that are seeking some vengeance that really haven't really needed it when they played them in the past. And so I'm interested. It should be fun to watch.
I think one thing to watch there, we'll get off into a quick sidebar. The health of Juice Wells, I haven't Googled that in a day or two, but he was missing sometimes. One intriguing piece that they added was Trey Knox, who's from our area,
Yeah.
Middle Tennessee. I think you were a high school contemporary with him. I don't know if you played him
Yeah, I
in
know
a
Trey. I know
game
Trey
or,
pretty well. I know Trey pretty
okay,
well.
yeah. How much do you think that helps Spencer Rattler this year? Because he was a talented kid in high school. He was at one point a top 100 recruit as a receiver. They made him into a tight end because of the body type. But it's intriguing to me because Carolina has had some tight ends who put up numbers, and he's a guy that we could look up at the end of the year and say that, hey, that kid led the SEC in receiving for tight ends not named Brock Bowers.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. Trey is Trey and I have known each other since high school. We played here in the mid-state area. Never got to play against each other, sadly. But when you grow up together and you're getting recruited by the same schools, you talk and whatnot, and you see each other at these recruiting events or camps or whatever it may be. When I saw Trey jumped in the portal from Arkansas, I hit him up immediately and tried to get him to Vandy. To be honest with you, I knew I was leaving. I knew Bresnahan was out of there. And so, I was just asking him, a little bit where his head's at and whatnot. And, to his credit, he was a little bit hush hush and held his cards close to his chest, which I would too if I was in his position. And, was really intrigued when I saw that he was going to South Carolina. I believe there's a tie. You guys may not know off the top of your head, but there's a tie there with a coach. I don't know if it's the tight ends coach or a coordinator, but he's playing for someone that he played for at Arkansas. And so that was the familiarity there that I think that he chose South Carolina. But yeah, he's an absolute weapon. I mean, the guy's ginormous. The guy looks like an SEC. The guy looks like an NFL first-round pick. I mean, he passes the eye test and then some. But he's really dynamic, man. He's not your classic, stiff tight end who just blocks, but he's also not your, fluid receiving guy. He's a little bit of a mixture of both. And I think, for Rattler to have a weapon like that as a quarterback, it opens up so much options and allows you to play more free. And obviously they got Juice Wells and some other guys who can really go. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see what that looks like. They have a great lineage there at tight end. Hayden Hurst a couple years ago was a first-round pick, still in the league. And, many more. Jared Cook, great tight end at South Carolina. These are all guys they used when Muschamp and his staff was recruiting me to go there. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see if this time next year, we're talking about Trey Knox lighting up some NFL training camp.
Guys, as always, be sure to leave your comments and everything. If you're wondering how you can support the channel, support this daily show we're doing now, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can check out that little heart sign there of the $sign as well. That's super chat. You can leave those and have your comment and highlight on the screen. It's just a nice donation to the channel. We appreciate all you guys who've done that as well on all these live streams. That always helps. And we again appreciate you guys. Leave your comments, feedback, and we will continue to discuss more SEC football here, Chris, as we move forward.
We've got, let's see, Missouri is technically not settled yet. Georgia's got settled this week. Carson Beck is the starter. I'm looking at the helmet schedule to my right here to make sure I get every team. I think, let's see, we've got Alabama. We talked about a little bit yesterday. Auburn settled this week. Ole Miss is, I think they still technically have not named a starter there, but I think that's Jaxson Dart, right?
As of now, that's what I believe. I mean, Blake, sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun.
No, I was going to say, yeah, you're right, Chris. Like, they haven't officially, but yeah, I'm with Gavin. I think that's who will start.
And AM too. Max Johnson is technically still in that competition, but I mean, let's say it's so you got Max Johnson and Wegman at A&M. You've got Dart and Sanders at Ole Miss. You've got God knows what at Alabama.
Let's how about Auburn? How about Auburn? We can jump into that as well. They got some talent.
Well, yeah. I mean, you haven't played against Peyton Thorne, but you watch a lot of college football. I'm very interested to see because he was probably better 2 years ago at Michigan State statistically than it was last year. Of course, the team was a lot better 2 years ago than it was last year at Michigan State. That's when I'll be interested. I don't guess you played against a Hugh Freeze coach team.
No, I never did. Hugh Freeze. I remember this about Hugh Freeze. I got whatever happened with him at Ole Miss. I got nothing but good experiences and good things to say about Coach Freeze. He when Ole Miss was recruiting me and offered me out of high school, him and his staff, or at least he did, waited. We met with me on Good Friday down there in Oxford before he left to go visit some family for Easter weekend. And I just remember how appreciative I was for him for sticking around, because it was the only time we could come down there. I think I was running around at some, baseball tournaments or something in the spring. I'm not really sure, but I got nothing but great things to say about my experience with him. I do have a couple people and friends and both that I play with at Vanderbilt, and Elijah McAllister and a couple others who are down there at Auburn, and the things I'm hearing from them are they're excited, and some new juice in the building is kind of what I'm hearing. And a lot of stuff that I've seen with Coach Freeze when he talks about Peyton Thorne being a starter, I think a lot of that decision was based off of leadership and experience. And it really sounds like Thorne's taken over that locker room. That's impressive as a transfer, especially coming from Michigan State in the Big Ten, which we all know is completely different than SEC football. And he walked into a situation where Robbie Ashford played a lot of games last year. He wasn't great. Let's be honest. He wasn't great. But he played a lot of games, and he did have some flashes. And so, you walk into a situation where, is this going to be, where Ashford takes the next step because he's got a new coach and a new system and kind of a clean slate, or are they going to go with a totally different guy based off of leadership and experience? And a lot of that decision, I'd probably say about 40% of that decision is not on the practice field, and it's made in the locker room with the leadership and the chemistry with the guys. And obviously Peyton Thorne's won that over. And so I think that's taken some, I wouldn't say a toll in a bad way, but it's definitely had a magnitude in Freeze's decision to name Thorne the starter.
One of my questions with Auburn is, do they have the weapons around him in terms of the receiving room? I think they got a respectable running back room if Hunter's back. Obviously, I mean, respectable's underselling it, but you know what I mean. But the issue a year ago is, I talking to people down there, they just had guys at receiver. And you need more than just plug-ins. I think in the SEC these days, we talked about how important it is to have a passing game. I think that's the question I've got. Now, look, Hugh Freeze has made it work with inferior talent a lot of places and beaten better people. So I don't take that off the table, but I do look at their receiving room, and clearly it's going to get better the way he is recruited, but I wonder how much that holds them back this year.
Yeah, I think that, I think this is going to be such an interesting year for Auburn. I have no idea what they're going to be at, because new coach, new quarterback, basically a bunch of new transfers that he's brought in, and they're kind of starting from scratch. The whole, Harsin thing was just weird off the bat since the minute they hired him, and it really never felt like he was their guy. Obviously, that stayed true as they let him go pretty quick. And so, everything I'm hearing is they're all in on Freeze, everything Hugh Freeze the whole way. I'm interested to see how much that administration gives him in terms of year one, maybe even halfway into year two. I don't know. And so, and that's absolutely, it's personnel. It's the guys that you're bringing in, and Auburn has a long history of some really good receivers. And when Auburn has won and been the Auburn that we all know, that we grew up and was playing in national championships, they had at least 2 or 3 guys out there that could go. And so, I'm interested to see how he does that. Does he do it through high school development? Guys, if you have a good eye in your recruiting and personnel department and can develop guys as a recruit, that's great. As we all know, the game's changing. So I'd be interested to see if he goes and grabs someone for a little bit more of a, immediate effect. It'd be really interesting. But yeah, I think there's a lot of not question marks in terms of bad stuff. But for Auburn, I just have no clue. I have no clue what they're going to look like this year. But, I think we may be sitting here 3 years from now, and we may be talking about Auburn being up there with some of the elites again.
Go ahead, Blake.
No, I was going to say that wide receiver group, we talked about them. I think that was one of the bold predictions I think I had, was that Jair Shorter would kind of be the guy that would emerge from that group. But you just think about, again, the new guys like that. Shane Hooks they brought in as well. Johnson returns. I guess he's probably the most experienced of the bunch, right? He had 26 receptions, 493, and 3 touchdowns last year. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to have to, again, to be a Hugh Freeze type offense, they're going to definitely need multiple, I think, of those guys to kind of really blend in pretty quickly and be kind of breakout type guys. Like I said, I went with Shorter. I've seen some people go with Hooks as that guy. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how that plays out for Auburn. So
the Missouri one, let's talk about that a minute, because we were asked about that one off the jump.
Yeah, let me
Brady
pull that
Cook,
up, Chris.
sure.
There you go.
Again, that's one that is, I think the last update was about 4 days ago on that one, and it's still between Cook and Horn. I think perception is, Horn is the guy that everybody's excited about. He was the higher rated guy. Cook is a guy. I'm not gonna say he's just a guy, but like when you start talking about first team All SEC quarterbacks, that's not a name that jumps to the top of the list. But I think this came out. My buddy Michael Bratton talked about that recently on that SEC podcast. He said, it came out that Cook was banged up a little bit last year, and they didn't go to Horn, which was probably a sign of not being ready at that point. And of course, Horn got hurt in baseball early in the year. I would presume that's not a setback for him this year. Cook does run a little bit. I think people undervalue that. I think he ran for over 500 yards last year, and I think he was 17 and 7 touchdowns to picks. So not making a lot of mistakes. And look, it's harder. I thought their running back room a year ago was pedestrian. Luther Burden never really came in and put up the eye-popping numbers that I think people thought they'd have, but Dominic Lovett more than picked up the slack. Of course, now he's gone to Georgia. So, Gavin, how do you size up that quarterback situation there? Do you think Sam Horn gets the job? Does he deserve to get the job? Or do they stick with Brady Cook, who, by the way, also was named a captain?
Yeah.
Kind of hard to name a guy a captain then demote him. That to me, I'm wondering if that's our tell right there.
Well, let's look back on some personal experience here, because that's exactly what happened with our team last year. We, named Mike Wright the starter in the game, and we played really well in the first couple of games. Mike was a fellow captain with me, and we were rolling with AJ just a few weeks into the season, and that came in and out, and Mike played some down the line when AJ got banged up and whatnot. But I think Drinkwitz's comments are very, very interesting to me, because I think you said it, Chris. Horn is the guy that they're excited about, the guy that kind of Missouri fans feel like is maybe the future, maybe has some more upside than Connor Cook. And so what Drinkwitz said is they're both going to play in the opener, maybe even the first couple of games. I'm not exactly sure what it was exactly. But to me, that's an open door. That's an open door of, let's see what these guys look like in, the first couple of games of the year. I think you're right. When Cook was banged up last year and they didn't go to Horn, I think that just means they knew he wasn't ready. But now he's had a whole entire winter. He's had a whole spring ball and now a fall camp. And, I think now is the time where they're really hoping that he arrives. And, we'll see if Cook can hold him off, but the pressure is definitely on. The pressure's on, and with coach's comments, the door is open. And so, let the best man win.
That's going to be an interesting game. I think their opener is South Dakota. Let me double check that. It
Yep,
is.
it
And
is.
that was not a South Dakota team that was very good last year. Occasionally you see teams that can put a scare into teams, especially in a week one situation. I don't think that's going to be that kind of a spot. I do wonder is that a situation where he really wants to see what it looks like when both guys get reps? Has Sam Horn gotten better? How does he respond to actually playing in a game? Because he really didn't do that a year ago. He might have thrown a pass or two, but not in anything meaningful. Is that one of those, okay, I know Brady Cook is my guy. I know people want to see Sam Horn. We'll play them both, and then the public can see that we picked the right guy. I'm very interested to know what the motivation is there, because it could be several things.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I think that, the one thing that goes against Horn is he's basically got little to no experience. I think he played in a game last year and was 0 for 2 passing, I believe. And so, compared to Brady Cook, who's played a lot of football. And so, we'll see. I think that they definitely want to get them both in there in that South Dakota game. Missouri should win that game. Make no doubt about that. They should win that game. And hopefully that, it's not just mop-up duty they're giving them, because it's really hard to learn and play at a high level if you're not playing with the one offensive line, the one receivers, the one running back. That's stuff that matters. And so, like I said, he wants, I think the general, what I would guess, and this is just a total guess, but from everything that I've, read and trying to read in between the lines, is they're hoping that Horn ends up being the guy. Now, I think that if they roll with Cook, I think they'll be okay. But I think that they're hoping that Horn will be the guy because of the upside he provides and what everybody's excited about. Because you're right, they got to get Luther Burden more involved. He's too talented of a player and way too good of a recruit, way too impactful and a game changer, a game breaker, whatever you want to call him, to be what he's been so far at his Missouri career. Just being frank, and Levet was the guy last year. It really wasn't Burden; it was Levet, and that was a huge. I think, in my opinion, that's one of the bigger transfers of in terms of like inner SEC transfers, was him going to Georgia. That dude is shifty as can be. He's fast. If you go back and watch a lot of Missouri's film, they use him a bunch on jet sweeps and stuff like that. And so I know that when we were playing Missouri and Mizzou week, we were more focused on that guy than we were Burden, and it should not be that way. And so we'll be interested to see, if they can get, Burden more involved by whatever their quarterback choice is this fall.
Chris, to wrap up the Brady Cook thing, again, it's interesting. We talked about him, how he finished last season. Didn't throw an interception after the Vanderbilt game. Last 6 games, didn't throw a single interception. Rushed for, I think, we had those couple games where he rushed for over 100 yards as well. Threw for back-to-back, 3 touchdown games. That one was in the blowout to Tennessee, the other against New Mexico State. But I don't know. I thought you could definitely see some improvement with him, but it will be interesting to see kind of what happens heading into this season. So,
well, Georgia, and that's maybe a good segue to something I want to pick Gavin's brain on next. I don't know how much we've gotten to see Carson Beck. But my goodness, you want to talk about a way to help a young quarterback break in? I guess he's not that young, but he's a first-time starter. Give him Dominic Lovett, Rod Thomas, Ladd McConkey, and Brock Bowers, excuse me. I don't know where Brad Bowers came from.
I think he's a chess player too, Chris.
Yeah, he's with Bobby Fischer there. Yeah, I mean, not to mention, 4- and 5-star recruits behind those guys. That is, I don't know. That is a nice jumping off point for a new guy.
It's a pretty nice place to start for sure. And I think so much of the quarterback position is about confidence. It's all about confidence, and you can tell because not only confidence in yourself, but as a teammate, as a tight end, as a receiver, or whatever it may be, you can tell when your quarterback's confident or not. And it helps a lot when you got the talent out there. And so whether it's Bowers, whether it's Levet or these other guys they have, McConkey is a great SEC receiver, by the way. I think that, he can play a little more loose knowing that he's got guys out there. And, we didn't even mention probably the best O-line in college football in front of him too. And so, you're protected. You can throw the ball to really any 4 or 5 spots on the field, and a 5-star guy is going to catch it and has a chance to go score a touchdown. That's a pretty good place to start as a starter. But let's keep it real. I mean, he's got huge shoes to fill. We talked about this yesterday. Stetson Bennett, who, virtually came out of nowhere and captivated all of us, early in his, I guess, second stint at Vanderbilt, at Georgia, when he, returned and led him to back-to-back national championships. Those are some big shoes to fill. And so, I think that he can play loose, but I think he knows what he's got to live up to. And, wins over, these other SEC teams matter because you don't want to lose these SEC games. But he's got to win the big ones. He's got to win the big ones in the SEC championship. He's got to win the national championship. And those are the ones that, truly matter. The Florida game in Jacksonville, those are the ones you got to win. It definitely helps when you got guys on the outside helping you like that.
Blake, I know that the list of topics today included Kentucky football. We'll get to that in a minute, but we were going into the show with the idea of talking about improved quarterbacks. I think Ole Miss was on our list to talk about a little bit. We hit that one earlier in the show. Any finishing touches we want to put on those topics before we move on to Kentucky?
No, I mean, I just want to bring up this comment by Dark Matter earlier, though. It makes a good point about, KJ Jefferson, in theory, could be the most improved quarterback if you just kind of think about, and look, we know how good he was last year, but we, bring in Dan Enos and sort of just the weapons that are around him, how they'll use Rocket Sanders, of course. And so, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think KJ Jefferson could take a huge step this year. And, of course, as we saw at SEC Media Day, the one word he kept saying was just, got to stay healthy. Like, it's just health. Like, not have to run as much, don't put himself, in that kind of position as much. And so I think it's a good point, Dark Matter. Also, before we move on to Kentucky, comment of the day right here. Predator An organism that lives by preying on other organisms, Chris. That's the first definition. 2 is a person or group that victimizes or exploits others for gain. Number 3, Chris, I don't know if you've seen this in Webster's lately, but it is also, they put Harold Perkins' picture in there as well. So great comment. Yes, we talked about Harold Perkins yesterday, but yeah, the man is just, he's something. So there you go.
Yeah,
he'll be ready.
If you're expecting argument from us there, I don't think you're going to get it. But
I heard the Maason Smith news just really angered him to the point to where he's already, I think he's already gone solo to get ready for the game in Orlando. I think he's already there. So he's just sitting on the field right now, just eating, like he's just ready to go.
They might not need the other 10 guys. Just throw Harold Perkins out there by himself and let him go.
That's what we said. That's what we said yesterday. And it's funny. I'll say this. I remember last year, 2 of the best defensive performances I saw as a, I guess at the time I was a fellow player. The 2 best defensive performances I ever saw was JT. I'm gonna mess up his name. He plays a defensive end from Ohio State. JT Tuimalu, I believe is how you pronounce it. I probably got it wrong. Against Penn State, dude had like a strip sack, a pick 6, a bunch of more sacks, and then Harold Perkins last year in the Arkansas game, I believe. Dude was an absolute animal. And I was watching it on TV, but I was so intrigued by it that I went and watched, the copy that they provide for all the SEC teams to watch film and stuff. And it was what Chris said. You could have taken the other 10 guys off the field and the plays probably still would have been the same. So it was one of the most impressive defensive performances I saw last year, but probably throughout my career. Hopefully we see more of that.
Here's the question for you guys, just off the top of your head. Who started the most games as a college quarterback in this league? I was thinking like KJ Jefferson might be the most experienced guy, but I thought, well, I bet you Leary's probably made more starts given what he did at NC State. Rattler's made a bunch. Peyton Thorne's made a bunch. And I got to thinking, we've got a lot of guys in this league that have played a lot of games. Now, a lot of them might be somewhere else, but experience kind of matters at that spot. And it feels like we've got a lot of dudes. Spencer Sanders might have played more games as a starter than anybody in this league.
Yeah.
Not in this league, but in college football, he may enter the season as the backup in Oxford.
Yeah, I think it's those 3 guys. I think it's Spencer Sanders, Ole Miss, which is wild because he could end up not playing in these games. I think it's
Will Rogers too. I knew I was leaving somebody out.
Yeah, Rogers as well. But Devin Leary played a lot of football, a lot of good football at NC State. And then, what was you said another one, KJ Jefferson as well. So yeah, all 3 of those guys.
All right, Chris, Kentucky.
Big expectations in Lexington this year. We talk about receiver rooms. I think Georgia, if you include the tight end, has got to be number 1 in the conference, if not number 1 in the country. But you look at Kentucky, Barry and Brown, Dane Key, Robinson, they like a couple of tight ends. They like their depth at receiver. They got some guys behind those guys. You got Devin Leary, a guy who has been very efficient as a quarterback, should be healthier than he was a year ago. By the way, you added Ray Davis in the backfield. We can get into that a little bit for just a minute. But just the passing attack that Kentucky's amassed here, Gavin. And, by the way, the return of Liam Cohen. That's not just a footnote. That's a big storyline. Mm-hmm. I am very interested to see what they have in Lexington this year. Now, look, I don't think we start getting a glimpse until late September, early October, because the front end of the schedule is not exactly going to be against world beaters. But my goodness, they have got some weapons to turn loose in Lexington this season.
Yeah, they do. And, first off, you can't talk about weapons without talking about Barry and Brown. And the dude's absolutely electric. Nashville product, by the way, Pearl Cone High School, 615. Wanted to say that. He is an absolute game breaker, and he has been. The most impressive thing is he has been since his first game as a freshman. He's been the same player. He's improved. And, Dane Key as well is a great receiver for the University of Kentucky. And so, I think last year was a disappointment because they couldn't protect Levis. They couldn't protect him. I mean, we beat him up in the game that we played him. Tennessee beat him up pretty good. They basically had that Ole Miss game and right in front of them and Levis gets drilled on a first round run. Granted, he lowered his shoulder into it and whatnot. but they couldn't protect him. Remember that was the game where his finger was facing sideways. You remember that and so I think they have better O-line. I think the offense coordinator returning is definitely a positive, but I think it's just what you said. I think the expectations are through the roof. You got a really good player who's played a lot of football, as we said, with Devin Leary coming in. You got a really good player in the backfield, Ray Davis, great friend of mine. It'll be really interesting to see what that looks like, next year. And I think the expectations are high, especially, with Stoops' built. Let's talk about that for a second. Mark Stoops has done an unbelievable job overall at the University of Kentucky football. But now I don't think that's an acceptable thing for them anymore. We all know their fan base and how they show up, especially here in Nashville around, I guess it is early March or February for that SEC basketball tournament. That is a passionate fan base. And I think the bar has been raised a little bit, and the expectation, the standard has been raised a little bit. I mean, they got to go out there and win 8-9 games now every year, and if they don't, that's gonna, in my opinion, it's gonna raise some question marks, especially with the the type of guys they're bringing in. So yeah, it'll be a really interesting year. I think there's some pivotal games on the schedule. I think it starts with the Vanderbilt game, to be honest with you, and getting see what that looks like after last year and what we were able to do up there in Lexington. I think the Tennessee game, I see some comments as well. That's in Lexington. That's it. That game's in Lexington. It's a lot different than playing there than it is in Knoxville. And so, it's interesting to see what that's going to look like this year. Long story short, completely different roster, new offensive coordinator, but the expectations, I would say, are right at what it's supposed to be last year with Levis, or maybe even a little bit higher.
By the way, Chris,
go ahead, Blake.
SEC football back in the live stream here, regular during the season. We know not going to let Kentucky fans forget about the 44-6 result there. But I was going to mention, Chris, you've heard the conversation I've had with Stuart Lackey. If you're a Kentucky fan, Stuart's going to be joining us every week for a Kentucky show, which we'll kind of, as usual, put up into multiple videos on the channel, and we'll have actually a couple of those going up the next few days. So, and we talked about it. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this is it's not just the roster he's built, but it's the staff that Mark Stoops has built there. And that's where the return of Liam Cohen offensively and what that can do for a team that just feels like if there was a year he was ever going to come back to Kentucky, it's like this one is like the most perfect timing you could get, just given what all is there and everything that's in place, as Gavin's talked about. But then it's on the other side too. And we've always talked about this, Chris, just the defense. You know what you're getting defensively with Kentucky and Brad White and what he's done there, and Mark Stoops, playing a role in that too. But it's just now you've got both sides of the ball where you feel like this is as strong as they've been, maybe, on both sides. When you look at it, I'm not saying this is going to be his best team because I don't necessarily like to make those proclamations before they play a game, but they got a chance, right? Like they got a chance to be a team that wins a lot of games and can win as many as he's had there, which is what I guess 10 is the most they've won there. I know Kentucky fans will correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly the possibility. And I think, again, it just goes back to the staff he's built and the continuity. I know Cohen left, but now that he's back, at least you've got familiarity there on both sides of the ball. And I think that's going to be really important for this team. So,
okay, we are not good. I say we. I think we try, but people are not good in general at assigning multiple culprits to something. They say, "Well, this didn't work because of this." Well, there might have been that and that were factors too. You look at Kentucky a year ago, and look, to me, the number one thing was they could not pass protect. And when you cannot pass protect, that messes a lot of stuff up. But they changed offensive coordinators after 1 year. So obviously that was a role in it. Will Levis's decision-making and sometimes leadership got picked apart a year ago. Gavin, you played it, people, you watched a lot of football. When you're unpacking last year and where it went wrong, how do you sort of order the culprits for Kentucky's offensive dysfunction?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to rewind my mind here because, you learn just as much about a team because during the week before you play them as you do on that Saturday, because you're diving into hours and hours of film. I mean, you're watching 4 or 5 of their games previously, and then you play them, and so you learn just as much about a team before you play them than when you do. And I think when we were preparing for them, and obviously I'm not on the defensive side of the ball, so I wasn't watching their offense that much, but I have unbelievable friends and all that, and my roommate was a linebacker, Kane Patterson. And, just talking with him and a couple other guys, that was the number one thing they talked about. They said, I think we're going to be able to get after him a little bit. And if you go back and watch, our game, we got him pretty good, and we got him with like safety blitzes for sacks that our safeties were getting with CJ Taylor, in the red zone, and that stuff that's not a winning formula for anyone. And it doesn't matter if you got Barry Brown, it doesn't matter if you got Dan Key or whoever you got out there. If you can't protect the guy who's throwing the ball and you didn't have time to throw it to him, I don't care who you got run out there catching the ball or running routes for you. And so that was, I think, that might have been our number one. I don't know, but it might have been our number one key to victory that week was get after the quarterback and pressure the quarterback. And obviously we were able to do that, and we were able to get a victory. But that was a fun game, man. It was cold, it was snowy, and I remember we got off the buses there, and which I think, by the way, I actually think that Kentucky Stadium, we played there at night a couple years ago. I think it's actually one of the more underrated places and environments in the SEC, to be honest with you. Obviously, we talked about their fans are rabid, but just the blue and the way they chant and cheer together, I really enjoy playing at Kentucky. But it's funny, we came off the buses last year, and we go out for warm-ups, and we're warming up, and then just like every other game, the other team is on the other side of the 50-yard line, but we didn't see them out there. And we were like, okay, I wonder if they're just doing this and that. They didn't come out to do their warm-ups when they played us out there. And I remember we go back into the locker room. They may have done, a couple little team thing or a 7-on-7 beforehand, but you go to a game, especially early, I'm sure the media people may know it more than fans. But there's guys out there in the field constantly, 2 hours, hour and a half, hour before the game. And their side of the 50 was empty until about maybe 25, 30 minutes to go. And I remember when we go back in the locker room, we took that as such a disrespect that they weren't even coming out there to warm up against us in this game. And, we went out there and were able to win and had a great experience there. But obviously this is, like we said earlier, a completely different team, completely different roster, completely different looking offense. It'll be interesting to see what this Kentucky offense moves forward. Like I said, I think Kentucky season is going to be predicated off very specific games, turning point games. I think it starts with the Vanderbilt game. I think it goes to the Tennessee game they host at home, and then even possibly the Florida game. That Kentucky-Florida game is always a great one every year. It is. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like.
Gavin, they get Ray Davis this year. They had Chris Rodriguez last year. I think people are missing some finer points on maybe how that changes the offense. Rodriguez was a home run threat. Could take it the distance against just about anybody. You saw that a few times. Ray Davis is not that guy. He's not an explosive guy. He's very good, though, at a lot of little things. He does not fumble. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's pretty good from what I remember in blocking assignments. You would know better than I would, but to me, you lose an explosive dimension in Chris Rodriguez, but maybe you gain some things in Ray Davis that Kentucky's offense was missing a year ago.
Yeah, I think, well, it's exactly what you said. I think that Chris Rodriguez was, when he got going, it was like, oh, there he goes. And I think that it's that, but sometimes also, if you go back and watch Kentucky last year, there was a lot of, handoff to Rodriguez up the middle, gain of 1, handoff to Rodriguez, hand up the middle, gain of 2. Sometimes he couldn't, see the hole, or he would get bogged up in the offensive line or whatever it may be. Ray Davis, who's a great friend of mine, will be a forever friend of mine, and I wish him the best in Kentucky, has some of the best vision I've seen. When he gets the ball, if you go back and watch some of our Vanderbilt stuff last year, before he even gets it, he's totally reading A through D gap on both sides at both times and can hit it. And when he sees it, he's rolling. And so, Ray was a great player for us. He's going to be a great player for Kentucky. We joke back and forth. I think I remember when Vandy beat Kentucky last year, I think when they played in basketball, the game at Rupp Arena, I commented or poked fun at one of his tweets or something like that. And he called me afterwards, and we talked for about 90 minutes and asked him how he was doing, his experience up there. And he's excited about it. I've heard great things, from him and a couple other guys about their experience in Kentucky. I've read about it as well. I think they got a lot of talent coming back. And so, that all goes back to the expectations. I think the expectation at the running back position for Ray is to be that bell cow. I think that he may have to block a little bit more and pass protect, especially if, they keep finding some woes on the offensive line like they did last year. But he's super willing and will stick his nose in there. But you got a different guy taking snaps with Leary. And so it'll be interesting to see how those guys play off each other in the backfield.
Okay, I want to ask you guys both something here. Take Leary out of it because he's a quarterback. If you were a defensive coordinator who was the guy on Kentucky's offense that's not a quarterback that you fear the most? Blake, I'll go to you, then we'll go to Gavin, then I'll give you my answer.
I mean, Ray Davis, I think, is the easy answer, but I mean, I could also go Barian Brown. I mean, we talked about him last year. I think just the different things he can do. I just feel like he's one of those guys that at any second can just go off for something. I think with Devin Leary, that will only, I think, up that a little bit. So, I mean, again, I think Ray Davis is the easiest answer, but I'll go Barian Brown as the next one.
I'll go with a guy who may be the second or third option. That's Dane Key. I think Dane Key is a great receiver. I spoke his name earlier in the podcast, but he's a great receiver for Kentucky and was kind of their – I would call – he's not nearly as explosive as Barian Brown, but he's probably like their Mr. Dependable. You talk about receivers kind of being like a speed guy. Is he a route runner? Is he a possession guy? I think that he's that possession guy that you can hit over the middle on third down, 3rd and 12 on a deep dig, on a dagger dig at 14 yards, and he's going to catch it, 10 times out of 10. And, there were multiple times last year where I was both watching them, but then also in our game where it was always, Dane Key. I mean, the guy had, 600 yards of receiving yards and a handful of touchdowns. Nothing eye popping, but he impacts the game and he impacts winning at a high level. And I noticed that watching him both on the game copies and when I'm watching, preparing for games last year, he was a guy that I was like, we got to cover that guy because he may not be the one who's breaking it for 70 yards and on a punt return like Barian Brown is. Got to defend that too. But he's the one who extends those drives and then opens up, the options for the other players. And so I think he's probably the most underrated player on that team, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would not have known this if I'd not looked it up. Key actually averaged about 1.5 yards per catch more than Brown did a year ago. But I think just watching Brown in the return gave that explosive speed. I mean, that's the name of the game these days. It's big plays and breaking things. And I think just as much of a stats guy as I am, I think that was the eyeball test for me. Not that those other guys can't do, but I think it's pretty interesting to me that we all three basically gave a different answer, which probably bodes pretty well for Kentucky's offense this year. That the fact that there are so many guys that we could cite as, hey, this is the guy that I'm worried the most if I'm a defensive coordinator on the other side. I think if you're in Lexington right now listening to that, that's got to be music to people's ears.
Yep, for sure. All right, Chris, got a 3-minute warning here before we wrap up. As always, guys, you can leave your comments, super chats, last chance for those. If you want to send those in, you can. Any of your comments, questions, rapid fire. We did this yesterday with Gavin. It was fun. He gave his pick for best road atmosphere in the SEC, and you can look at yesterday's show if you want to see his answer for that. But, yeah, so be sure to, again, leave your comments, feedback, and all that. We do this daily, 11 to noon Central Time, and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. It really helps us out, and we appreciate you guys hanging with us here for this hour.
Blake, anything in the questions or comments section worth addressing as we wrap things up today?
I mean, we've pretty much gone over everything. I think David's response here was to the was it the game, maybe game started.
Good.
I think that may be. I brought this up earlier from Dark Matter, which I thought was it's a good point. Think about the longest time we were just always like, man, the East, when you had some of those teams that were really just trying to get back on the up. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Georgia was there, right? If you really think about it, Georgia was trying to get back to the, the pinnacle and trying to get back up. But here they are now. It's back-to-back defending national champions. Tennessee, like we said, is certainly on the rise after what happened last season. Kentucky, we just mentioned. We've all said I think Vandy's going to be improved. Florida's the wild card. I think Missouri's defense could be fantastic. See what happens with the offense. South Carolina, they have the talent. A lot of new players on the roster, but you sort of I think expect Shane Beamer to get it done. So yeah, I mean the East is as fascinating this season as it's been in a long time. I think when you just consider all those elements, and it's not just the SEC and the SEC West anymore, which it felt like it was for a long time. So.
Yeah, thank you for the listener for coming up with the starts. I thought about throwing that out to the audience, but I didn't want to make that ask of them. So predictably, somebody did it on there. I forgot Jaden Daniels had started that many games at Arizona State. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that just illustrates how many good, experienced quarterbacks there will be in this league this year, which I think makes for great football. Yeah, let's close it here with the East, okay? The West has gotten all the attention, but do you guys remember a time where so many fan bases felt as good about the state of their program in the East? I mean, all at the same time. I guess the one that there's two you circle a little bit. Missouri, we're not quite sure where that's going, but you look at Eli Drinkwitz and the way he's recruiting. He just brought in, maybe the number one player in the country. I think their defense sets them up for success this year. Florida's in one we talked about, the ways that could fall apart, and they could get impatient with Billy Napier, but the recruiting's great. The way he's building the program is great. Blake, you and I are older than Gavin, but when is the last time that so many fan bases felt as good about the direction of their program within the SEC East as they do as we're sitting here doing this in late August?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina. Like you said, I think Vanderbilt fans I think they're optimistic. Certainly, I think just building off of, some of the bright spots of last year, I think there's a lot of optimism there. And we talked about the schedule too, and the potential for a great start with that schedule. And then again, yeah, I mean, I knew I'm forgetting to mention somebody. But Florida's, look, like we said, Florida, there's a wide range of opinions we talked about yesterday. But guess what? I've seen a lot of Florida fans who think, hey, everybody can keep doubting us, but from what I see and hear around the program, this is it. Like, we're about to turn this thing around. And so maybe that happens. And so, yeah, I mean, I think every single program in the East has high expectations. And I think to me, the two that are the most, I don't know what the word is, but I think Florida and Missouri are the ones where you could see it go in multiple directions. But, I just don't know. Like I said, I'm probably higher on Missouri than most people are. That was one of my bold predictions, I think, was that they were going to start whatever heading into that LSU game, beat a top 25 Kansas State team. And but yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right, Chris. I mean, it's been a while since every single program in the East has reason to be very optimistic. I think heading into the season, somebody's got to lose games, but everybody's optimistic, and we haven't seen that in a while in the East. So
yeah, and that's what I was going to say, Blake. Is that's great, that's awesome. But all that means is there are going to be a couple people that are going to be let down by the time this season ends.
Somebody's going to be disappointed.
Somebody's going to be unhappy, and somebody's going to be calling for the coach, and somebody, I mean, it always is, and everybody has all the right answers except for the people who are actually working it. So I guess we'll see what happens.
That's what happens when it gets to this point. Chris, I was going to say is when you get to a point where literally everyone in the conference is optimistic, think about it. All 14 schools, somebody's going to get fired. That's all it means.
I know. I keep watching this, and I listen to the predictions of optimism everywhere, and I'm like, I don't know which one of you guys it's going to be, but a couple of you are going to be really disappointed at the end of the year. But you could see it coming from here. So
hey, that's what makes SEC football great, man. That's what it is.
Hey, this year, we may have a whole other show about this, just about all the reasons I think college football. I mean, there's some bad storylines out there. There's some things we don't like about the game. The conference stuff, the NIL inequalities thing. There are a lot of things I don't like, but man, these dynamics have made it a fascinating season ahead, and I think is maybe as interesting a season as we've had maybe in our lifetimes, guys. I think that could be a whole other show for another day. But guess what? We're at the end of our hour, so we hope you liked our show. If you did, leave us a like, hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Leave us a super chat when you're here next time. And put stuff in the comments. If there's topics you want us to discuss, we'll be glad to think about that. We have a plan before every day, and we stick to that, but we always get into some other things too. So for Gavin Schoenwald, for Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again Friday from 11 to noon Central.